hear that music, Mark?
Yeah, I can hear it. Yeah.
Groovy. It's all working. Well, good morning, people. If you're dialing in this morning to our Leaders Live breakfast show this morning, we've got Mark Fritz in the room today. I'm really excited about that. Mark has been a guest in our Inspired CEOs Game Changer conversation several times, actually. It's really great to have him on Leaders Live this morning as well. And we're going to be talking about high performance today. That's kind of where we're heading. I'll bring Mark in a minute, just as the countdown timer goes, just so we can get people in the room. And oh yes, and I can see me live now, which is all good. So that's excellent. It's always good to know when the technology works, I have to say. So this morning we were practicing some of the technology, and we had a Dalek in the room. So it's just amazing what happens when audio or video goes wrong. You know, it's like, oh, how do we fix that? And do you know what happens is the reboot works really, really well. So that's a great piece of advice for you folks. Okay. So hi. So we have got Mark Fritz in the room. I'll come to Mark in a moment, but just very briefly, how you doing, Mark? You all right?
Yeah, very good. Very good. Glad to be here.
Glad to be here. Brilliant. So this is just a quick introduction. This is our second special edition Leaders Live breakfast show this morning. And we did one yesterday with the lovely Claire Richmond. Today we've got the expert Mark Fritz with us. We're streaming live today on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Now I did this for the first time yesterday. It worked great, folks. So yeah,
Fantastic.
it was all good, Mark, I tell you. So we had a lively bunch yesterday on the chat, and please feel free to interact with his channel too. You know, we'd love to see your comments coming up on the screen as we're going. You can ask questions of Mark or myself as well. We'd love to have your interaction. Now, yesterday, people told me that the audio for me was quite quiet yesterday, and my guest was fine, but I wasn't quite so fine. So hopefully I've fixed that all today, and please let me know if the audio is good enough on both Mark and myself when we're talking. So quick teaser for you. Are high-performing teams a myth or a reality? And if high-performance teamwork is a thing, what do they actually look like? You know, what are the principles that drive high performance, folks, you know, versus just plain old fashioned good teamwork, you know? And do high performance teams self-organize, or are they led? And we'll be getting to all of that lot and a whole lot more in the next 30 minutes or so. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm Andrew Jenkins, and this morning I'm joined by the amazing Mark Fritz. Let's give Mark a round of applause.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, as if by magic, you know, there's a whole virtual live audience out there. So
You're a multimedia machine.
yeah, I think it's someone said that I'd give Piers Morgan a run for his money. So
There you go. There you go.
I do
Good,
take that as a
good.
compliment, actually. So Mark, your strap line is lead your business to thrive without you.
Yeah.
Gain time
Yeah.
for you and your family using the power of ownership. So hello, good morning, and how you doing? And great to have you on my Leaders Live channel breakfast show this morning, Mark.
It's great to be here. Yeah, it's having a good week and in the middle of a good week. So this is a perfect way to keep the week going well.
Absolutely. Well, you know, the reason why we're having a good week, well, probably one of the reasons is that actually in the UK, we've actually got decent weather for a change. So we're all very happy
Absolutely.
about bright weather. And we've been in the 20s, you know, all week so far. So it's like, whoop, whoop, great. Summer's here. Fantastic. So before we come to Mark, look, just some very quick context setting for us. So Leaders Live, you know, what's that about? Well, it explores topics that, you know, help us to make sense of the rapidly changing times that we're living through right now. And some say, and I'm sure that Mark would agree with this, and it's certainly something that I buy into, is that we're probably living through a fourth industrial revolution right now. And you know, history will probably, you know, write it down as that. You know, we're living through it at the moment, so history takes a bit of time to catch up. So, but we believe that, and many thought leaders today believe that too. And you know, there has, I suppose, one way of framing this, you know, there has never been a moment quite like this one. And folks, we ain't going to snap back to pre-pandemic times either. It ain't going to go back to where it was either. And I think Mark and I are very agreed on that, having talked to Mark before about this. So, you know, with that in mind, Leaders Live is about building extraordinary community of leaders, business owners and managers to grow yourselves and your teams that begin with an inside-outside mindset. You know, it's that kind of shift that Leaders Live is helping to develop. And that leads to actions that create future business success. And for me, I work with leaders, I build teams, I inspire organizations to build better business through excellent teamwork. That's kind of where I like to head. And I'm known as the kind of high performance team guy. And I'm talking to Mark today about high performance. So I'm going to learn a thing or two as well from Mark. So that's fantastic. So yeah, that's just a little bit about where we're doing. So I'm going to come on to Mark right now. So Mark, lead your business to thrive without you as your strapline. Set the scene for us. They say that teamwork makes the dream work, right? How do teams pull together, and how do they put out their best game? Mark, go for it. Over to you.
Yeah, it's absolutely correct, because success is a team sport, right? If you're going to try to do everything yourself, you only have 24 hours, right?
Right.
It's everybody working together that way, and I think what's really successful you see in very high performing teams is they realize what they need to do together and what they can do by themselves. And I think that is absolutely key. And I think it's very interesting because it's challenging businesses to think differently now. So everybody was home working, so they figured out how that worked that way. Yeah. But, when do they need to be in the office? Why did they need to be in the office? And what do they need to do together, face to face? And what can they do individually? And I found that the best teams have the balance right. Right. Or they integrate well what they do individually, what they do as a team, what they do when they come together. Because when they come together, 1 + 1 does not equal 2, it equals 20, etc. And I think that's a key thing that people are learning. Yeah.
I like to call that I to the power of we. Chris Hardy, my colleague, calls it 1 + 1 = new. And you call it 1 + 1 = 21.
That's great. I like that. I like that. Yeah.
So is this about self-organizing, and or is it leading, or is it collaborating? How do people make those kind of decisions to either come in the office or to work in a hybrid way, or which days are we going to work in the office, all of those things? How do they self-organize around that, or are they led to do that, high performing teams?
Well, I think everybody needs a direction, or they need a goal or a target, what you're trying to achieve. And I think leadership is there to create a picture of what we want to achieve together, and to create the emotion behind it, the why do we want to achieve this together, what do we want to achieve. And then the team can come up with it. So it's a matter of what are the best ways for them to collaborate with each other. And I think, depending on what you're trying to challenge you have, depending on time scale, depending on pressure, there's no one set way to collaborate well together. Right. But what I found is the teams that discuss how they're going to collaborate to make this happen faster are much better teams than ones that don't talk about it and they just sort of try and wing it. There's an old saying, it says, what's talked about comes about, right? So if you're not talking about the right things aren't going to happen.
Right. Okay. So you need to talk about the right things, right? To get the right things to go right, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And talk about how you're going to do that, how you're going to work together, right? Because, many years ago, I started 25 years ago leading virtual teams. Yeah. And so basically we put the stars that we had in the organization, not managers, pull them together and say, how should we communicate together across all these different locations in order to do the job better? And they came up with some very simple ideas, but some very interesting ideas that we implemented. And the thing is that they followed it and they embraced it because it wasn't management telling them how to organize. It was them telling us how they wanted to communicate.
Yeah. So there's some sort of agreement that goes on and some sort of buy-in and collaboration to determine the rules, Mark, I guess.
Yeah, there should be. And, and actually they come out to maybe a handful of principles or things that we're going to follow.
Yeah, now I want to come back onto that. So that sounds like team charters and principles. And I believe that principles are really important. And I'd like to pick on that a little bit further, a bit later on. But, having managed high-performing teams myself in the past, and in the present, actually, it's a really addictive experience. For those folks out there, and welcome to Ian Price and Stephen Stroud, who've commented this morning, and the rest of you that are on listening. If you've ever led or been part of a high performance team, and I've done both, I've led and been part of, it's very, very addictive. It's like gravity, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like a super glue that, what are your thoughts about that, Mark?
Well, when you have a really high performing team, you're building ideas upon each other.
Yeah.
Right. And it's kind of like when you're working with very talented people and you're working well and you're really making progress towards where you want to go. It's kind of like you're pulling each other's creativity out of you.
I like that.
Right. So you're pulling the creativity out so that everybody is sort of, they're doing more and more things that they like. They're using more of their potential. And I think what you'll find is a high performing team is using more of everybody's individual potential, magnify that, and the team's potential increases like crazy.
Yeah, it's almost like, if you've got good resourceful states of mind in a team, in yourself, and everybody comes with that, then it has an exponential effect, doesn't it? In that sense, it just self-perpetuates itself, doesn't it?
Yeah, because you can't have a high performing team unless you have people who are individually really performing well and adapting and so forth. What I found is that if everybody is adapting, trying to adapt to each other, everybody's coming closer together, right? And the old saying, a team is only as powerful as its weakest link. But I think it's so important to how would you say? You can't have a high-performing team with team members who are spectators. You can't. It just doesn't work. They can't be just coming along for the ride, saying nothing in meetings and everything. And so I think one good rule is don't allow spectators in your team. Yeah.
Don't allow spectators in your team, right? So Ian Price is just saying to me that the sound is a little quiet for me. So I've just turned that up. So please give me some feedback on whether the sound is all right now. Diane Ivory says, very important to include teams in how best to work together.
Yeah.
And then where else have we got? We've got a couple of claps from Ian Price, and he's got to drop off now. He's looking forward to listening back later. So thanks for joining in, Ian. So, for me, listening to you, there's something about pulling power of collaboration there and trust. And talk us a little bit about that and trust and handling conflict, etc. in strong teamwork for high performing teams.
Yeah, I mean, a high performing team has conflict, right? I think the biggest issue I had when I was leading teams is when they were too happy. Right? if they're never arguing at all, that either means I have everybody who's the same and they think the same,
right?
Or they're afraid to say what they really think in front of each other.
Right.
And so you want people to be able to express them and be different. And sometimes, like Patrick Lencioni says, sometimes they'll cross over and get a little too personal.
Won't they just?
But unless you're reaching the limit, you don't know, you're not getting everybody engaged. And if people aren't speaking their mind, you're not using the full power of the team. So I think some immature leaders, they view conflict as bad.
Yeah.
Well, conflict around the right way to move forward or disagreements on that is not necessarily bad. It's actually quite good.
Yeah.
Because usually conflict about making a better product or disagreements about making a better product or service results in a better product and service. So I think it's so important to have the, how would you say, the emotional strength to allow some disagreements and help people through the disagreements versus creating an environment where you don't allow them to disagree and things get not said.
Yeah. Do you know, that is so encouraging to hear. And Diane Ivory says, great point. A quiet team is a worry. And it's really interesting because, I'm working with a team at the moment. We're going through that kind of storming phase and it's quite uncomfortable actually, but I think listening to you, I was a little bit worried about that because I'm a very sensitive person. And, I was getting a little bit worried about that, but actually what you're saying is this is really healthy, and sometimes you mentioned earlier that sometimes we stray over the line on that, and that's okay too, because we're just finding out where the limits is, and it's okay to sort of stretch into the unacceptable, providing you apologize fairly quickly, right? And come to your senses.
People are closer
Yeah.
after a resolved conflict. And
Yeah.
but you have to understand this. I'll give you a funny one,
Lovely.
an actual experience I had. I had a huge meeting in the center of France with people from all over Europe, and we didn't have enough resources to do all the projects. And on the first day, people were really arguing. And the guy with the biggest project was getting extremely upset. My operation manager whispers in my ear and says, "Are you going to stop this?" I said, "No, I'm glad it's happening
Get
because
it
I
happen,
knew it
baby.
was going to happen."
Yeah.
And what I arranged for the evening was go-karting and beers.
Oh, those two go really
So,
well together, right?
and they went through all their aggression on the go-kart.
Yeah.
At 1 a.m. in the morning,
Yeah.
the person who was arguing the most comes up to me and says, "Thank you very much. We needed this." They went
Brilliant.
into the second day, exactly the same issues, but they were more constructive.
Isn't that amazing? So they got through on their own without being managed to get through their conflict, and they self-sorted themselves out. And Diane has chipped in brilliantly. Diane, I love your comments here. People can go unnoticed unless given a chance to demonstrate what they have to offer. So we've got to
Yeah,
pick up the quieter ones too, right? To let them shine as well. Mark, you talked about
absolutely.
diversity earlier. Talk to us a little bit about that diversity piece.
I mean, you need diversity. Would you like to go to a symphony orchestra and there was no harmony and they
Yes.
were all playing the same note? It wouldn't sound very good.
Yeah.
So you need diversity of thinking because that's one of the keys that pulls people creativity out because
Mm.
people thinking differently. There was one guru who said something interesting I found one time. He says, my goal in life is to constantly meet people who disturb my view of the world, right? Because you're constantly stretching your perspective. So you need
Oh,
diversity to
that's
to
lovely.
really come with all the different ideas or the possibilities.
That's lovely.
Um, the quiet ones are more difficult in that you can't allow them to be quiet. So often a good thing to do is ask for input ahead of meetings or use post-its at the beginning and say everybody write 5 ideas down. That means that the quiet people have to get their ideas down because often, the people who talk all the time, they probably don't have all the best ideas. The
Right.
people that are quiet, you have to get those ideas out of their head
Exactly.
so that you can use it.
Yeah.
And I think the most successful leaders are good at getting the quiet, the introverts, getting the ideas out because they know that the team cannot act on ideas that stay in people's heads.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? The extroverts are just using all the airspace, and the introverts are sitting there thinking, I just wish they'd shut up and I'd have time to actually say something. Or then the regret afterwards, I wish I would have said something. And making space for both is absolutely vital because that thinking time that's going on in someone's head is really important, isn't it? It's not just all the extroverts that have it at all. Far from it, in fact.
Exactly. So, I mean, you could say that a high performing team is the best at using all the ideas in everybody's heads in a collaborative way to achieve the goal faster.
I love that. I love your phrases, Mark. They're just brilliant. I love that. And Diane's just chipped in here and said, look, ahead of team building activities, I ask the manager who are the quiet ones and who need pushing. I
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that. And she's spot on there, isn't she? Let's
You
let's
need to
let,
know them.
yeah. Okay, good. Okay, we get that. Now, talk to us a little bit about the principles. We talked earlier about principles. Um,
Yeah.
and
Well,
you're a
if you think of it this way, a culture is basically shared expectations, right?
culture is
We
shared expectations. Okay.
it's just shared expectation. It's an expectation of we're aligned on what we want to achieve together,
Yeah.
and we have a shared expectation of how we will behave with each other,
Okay, so there's some
right?
sort of principle contract there or something or other, yeah? Some rules of
Yeah.
engagement.
So how are we going to behave with each other? And so
Okay.
that's absolutely key.
Mm,
So, what are we going to do? One of the things when we started that virtual working 25 years ago is how are we going to communicate with each other, right? And I'll give you the one thing I was looking for.
mm.
If I had a high performing team, I had people willing to pick up the phone and deal with an issue in real time, then send an email and copy the world in.
Oh, gosh.
And
Yeah,
so that's what I was looking for. If
yeah.
people
Real
trusted
time.
each other, if people knew each other well enough to pick up the phone and deal with the issue, then we were moving forward faster.
Right. Okay. So an indicator of trust is if people are having discussions real time rather than textual conversations, because
Yeah.
things get lost in text or people get bent out of shape in written form, don't they?
Yeah, they get bent out of shape. You don't control the emotion by which someone reads your email,
Yeah.
right? Someone could have just pissed them off big time. And then
Technical
they
term, that,
read your
folks.
email, and your email had a few words that are the lightning rod.
Yeah. The lightning rod, yeah, and isn't that it? And things come out in conversation, and we're better with one another face to face, or at least conversation to conversation, person to person, whether that's online,
Yeah.
or whether it's a telephone call, or whether it's face to face, having a cup of coffee.
Yeah, yeah,
All of those
yeah,
things work, right?
and yeah, all those things work, and it's a combination of those things that work. And I think that's where we're getting a little bit too far overboard with video these days,
Yeah, we need to
because
come
I
back a
think
bit, right?
the combination of video for some things,
Yeah,
just a phone call for others,
yeah,
text, whatever. I think it's the variety that builds a stronger relationship.
yeah,
Because now when people are coming on to Zoom, they feel it's more formal.
yeah. Okay.
Formal. And then if a quick chat on WhatsApp, or just do a quick audio call, or let's say that you want to really have a difficult conversation with someone,
Yeah.
you're going to have an easier conversation if you're both walking in the park in different locations,
Too right.
just on audio, than if you are trying to do a formal, Zoom call and all these other things. So I think people are losing track of using the technology in a variety of ways to build stronger relationships.
Yeah, and now we're out of lockdown, right? We can readdress and rebalance that a little bit, because I've felt very much the Zoom fatigue thing that a lot of people have experienced, and it is kind of a flat 2D world, isn't it? And whilst we see dogs and cats and people's families and things like that, which do make it slightly more informed, which I'm really pleased about, you still get that Zoom fatigue. Where actually walking in the park with somebody, even if it's only a 1 meter distance, for social distancing purposes at the moment, then so be it. But at least you can share a cup of coffee right outside or whatever.
Yeah, it's always the combination. The face to face. It kind of like refills the tank of people's relationship, right? Because it's you need that. And you can do a lot virtually and everything like that, but you need some face-to-face time, so that people feel closer to each other.
Yeah. Build up that emotional bank account. It was a Steve Covey thing, wasn't it? Put some emotional exchange into your bank account, into your emotional bank account. I really love that phrase. So what about mistakes, Mark, and learning from mistakes? And I remember you using a phrase at one point, like if you miss a golf putt in golf, don't get hung about missing it, just move on and move to the next hole, but learn, right? Talk to us a little bit about high performing teams and mistakes and learning from failures and things like that.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing is they say that the top sports stars and other people, they have the ability to keep two conflicting thoughts in their head.
Yeah.
And it won't harm their performance. Say a golfer. Okay. A golfer will think that they're going to make every putt because they have to have that image of they're going to do it. But if they miss it, it's not the end of the world. They forget it, and they take the learning and they move on. So what I found is that it's some people who say I have to do complete success or I'm a disaster, or basically entrepreneurs are basically saying, if I fail, I'm moving forward faster than if I'm just thinking and doing nothing. Yeah. So I think we have to handle mistakes as a way of moving forward. And so the leaders that struggle with this is they view mistakes as kind of judging or penalizing versus mistake as a learning to move forward faster. Yeah. And, one time I did a session, I had 100 business leaders, and one guy comes up during the break and says, I need to talk to you because he just relinquished the CEO role and he's now chairman, and the CEO within 2 weeks destroyed the culture because how the CEO acted on a few key mistakes.
Yeah.
And now that was right before Christmas. And now half the company doesn't want to come to the Christmas party.
Yeah.
Just because how the CEO handled a few key mistakes and how that story about the mistakes traveled through the organization. Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? So, part of high performing teamwork is also to build that connection and that community as well, isn't it? And to nurture that.
Yeah.
And if a mistake is made, then you don't single that person out and blame them for it, because that produces fear and is the opposite to belonging and safety, right?
Right.
I
And you just prevented any risk taking for the future
totally.
because
Yeah, people get that real fast, like putting a hand in fire, right? You just don't do it anymore.
you're not going to do it again. Yeah.
So that's a lovely saying, says Diane. Let's just get that up on the screen there. Failure is just first attempts in learning. Yeah, I mean, that's so true, isn't it? I remember a guy with his team, and they'd made a massive error in a project they were running on, and they were debriefing, and the boss sort of said, look, we're working as a team here, so no one's singled out here, but as a team we're never going to make that mistake again, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that was a beautiful way of acknowledging the fact that we're all in this together, folks. There's no one to just single out and blame here. We're all part of this team.
Yeah,
and,
definitely.
thought that was,
it is, and then everybody views it as now it's all part. We have a part to play and making sure it never happens again.
Exactly.
So now everybody has taken the responsibility to move forward, and I think that's key. And sometimes they'll come down hard, very people, even individually in private, but they don't get the team learning out of it if they're just penalizing one particular person. So that's a great way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that becomes one of your principles then as well, doesn't it? That in the event of failure, we work together, we take equal responsibility for this, and we collectively own it and go through, and no one is going to be put in the chair to be blamed, right? No one's going to get the finger. Okay, exactly. So there's another principle. All right. So how do high performing teams, in your experience, set outcomes, hit milestones? Is there a balance of asking and telling? Mark?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if everybody's in meetings all the time, things aren't really getting done, right?
Yeah, right.
And so you have to allow the work. I think in a high performing team, people know what they need to achieve together.
Yeah.
In other words, they know the role in achieving it, and you're not managing every activity.
Okay.
You're basically, your goal is to manage progress, which means that you're asking about the steps, and you're following up at the steps towards achieving it, the milestones, versus just tracking every activity. Because if you're tracking activities, you're just going to slow the team down too much.
Yeah, it becomes tick-boxing, right?
The more you track activities, the more discussion you create on just busyness.
Yeah.
You should always talk about progress. What are you going to hit by, say, the end of the week or end of next week in terms of your achieving? And let people define their own how, because they'll definitely take more ownership of their own how than yours.
I love that. Let people define their own how. Set the outcome, but let them do it their way, right? Because you're going to get the outcome that's right, and it might be even better than you thought it might be if you let go of the house, right?
Absolutely. Because the biggest problem that leaders have when they first start leading and onward is they judge people based on, oh, that's the way I would do it, so it's okay. It's not the way I would do it, so it's not okay, and then they micromanage them. Believe me, the higher you climb, the more your way is out of date. They probably have a better way than you. So you should listen and let them figure out the how.
Brilliant. Claire's just said she's got to go in a minute, but she's made a comment here, which is quite interesting, actually. We might be able to pick this up before she goes. But so I have to go now. One question I have would be, and I'm just trying to work out how I can see this. Yeah. I would have us spotting the non-team player poor performer. What's your thoughts on that? I think it's more of a question of Claire's rather than a statement that.
Well, you have to address non-performance because,
Sure.
you're how would you say, every non-performer is demotivating your best people in the team because now they have to deal with them and they're getting frustrated. And so you have to distress them and say the non-performer, and set expectations on them of where their performance should be. And many times it's not necessarily just performance, it's more their behavior
That's right.
that's causing a problem. So you have to have a good discussion around the behavior, and set examples of what behavior has to be. Ask them for examples. What should your behavior be? And hold them accountable for that.
Right.
Because if you don't hold people accountable at the bottom, because a lot of leaders, some leaders will do this and say, okay, I'll focus on my high performers, and then I'll let the non-performers, and I'll push them to the side and move them out. It's kind of like move all the dead wood away and let the guys go on. And then you're creating a longer term problem in that way. So I think it's having the courage to have a difficult conversation around the non-performer to make sure that the expectations are clear. Because sometimes if they don't know they're not performing well, there's no encouragement for them to change. So you're going to have those difficult conversations to move those people forward.
Okay, so another principle here is that in a high-performing team, you have those difficult conversations as well.
Yeah, it's not like wine. They don't get better with time.
I love that. Okay. Now, one thing I notice about high-performance teamwork is and we'll kind of finish here on this question or this statement, the power of collective brainstorming, Mark, is so powerful, and working through collective problem solving. But it's more than consensus, right? This isn't about consensus. No. It's about kind of coming to an agreed decision, taking it, acting on it, learning from it if it's wrong. What are your thoughts on that, Mark?
That's a great way to put it, because not everybody is going to agree on everything.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Now, I think Colin Powell said it or something. We can disagree up until we make the decision, and then after the decision we stop disagreeing.
And we buy
in a lot of corporate companies, no one disagrees before the decision because they don't want to speak up, and then everybody's disagreeing after the decision, which means they're not implementing it. Yeah. So I think it's so important, that way, to get the collaboration and get the ideas out. I'll tell you a funny one, that towards the end of my career, I thought, I have a high performing team when I'm not involved, because they're able to do more on their own. So I was thinking, my job is to orchestrate that the right conversations are happening about the right topics at the right time, and I'm not in the conversation.
And I'm not in the conversation. I love that. Brilliant. Look, listen, Mark, we could go on for ages, and people have got their working day to go on to. Luckily, Claire did catch that. She said, thank you. I did manage to catch the answer to that. So that's made Claire a happy lady. So that's
very good. Very good.
I'm really pleased with that. So listen, Mark, thank you. We're probably, it sounds like we could do another one of these. So I think we need to have a round 2 of this discussion.
Sounds good. I would love to do it.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. So listen, folks, hopefully, you found this topic useful. Just changing scenes. Can't do 2 things at once, as they say for blokes. So hope you found it useful. Hope you found it food for thought. And by the way, if you're seeking to do, if you're seeking some advice about high performing teams, by all means contact Mark on LinkedIn or myself. If you're wanting to build a high performance team with your leadership team, please contact me via PDX as well. I'd love to work with Mark together on something. I mean, that would be a great project. And also, if you are an SME business owner who's finding it lonely at the top, then please feel free to contact me about joining our Inspired CEOs community. And actually, Mark has been a guest speaker for us a few times there, being one of our Game Changer conversations. I mentioned that earlier. So, links to all the above will be in the description text shortly, folks, after this session. And that's all for now, folks. And it's goodbye from me, and it's good day from Mark, and see you again soon. Very soon next week. Cheers now, Mark. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Andrew. It was great. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day, great morning, great afternoon, great evening, wherever you are. And we'll see you again soon. Cheers for now. Bye-bye.